May 2nd, 2009. The world stopped because of a scoreline nobody there had seen in a generation. Real Madrid 2, Barcelona 6. What they were watching wasn't a defeat, it was a dissection. At the centre of it stood a 21-year-old Argentine playing in a new position. Pep Guardiola knew he had built something that would change football forever. But what was that? This is the moment Guardiola knew he created a monster. For the opening years of his professional life, Lionel Messi was a right winger. That was the assignment. Frank Rijkaard stationed him out wide and handed him the classic winger's to-do list. Get chalk on your boots, beat your full-back, cause problems near the goal, head down, raw pace, and a dribble that made grown professionals look like they were trying to tackle a rumour. It worked, mostly. Fullbacks across Spain spent their weekends being publicly embarrassed by a teenager who weighed roughly the same as their kit bag. But there was a flaw in the setup, and anyone who watched closely could see it. Playing Messi on the touchline was like buying a Ferrari to drive through a school zone. Technically the thing moves. You're just wasting the entire point of it. Out on the wing, he had a sideline pinning him in and half the pitch sitting behind his back. His best work, the killer pass, the sudden burst into the soft centre of a defence, all of it needed room that the right flank flatly refused to give him. So he drifted inside anyway. He couldn't help it. The gravity of the game kept dragging him toward the middle, toward the place where goals are actually born. And there was a second problem, one that had nothing to do with tactics. For years, Messi's own body had been trying to sabotage him. A growth hormone deficiency as a kid meant he had needed medical treatment just to reach a normal size, and the rapid growth that followed left him fragile. A hamstring here, a pulled thigh there, a metatarsal that cost him 11 league games one season. He was so quick, so low to the ground that opponents could only stop him by fouling him, and his body kept paying the bill. So the young Messi was a paradox. Clearly the most talented player at the one you couldn't fully rely on, stuck in a position that used maybe half of what he could do. There's an irony buried in all of this too, because the centre was never foreign territory for him. Back in Argentina, as a boy at Newell's Old Boys, he had played behind the striker, right in the heart of things, pulling the strings. The famous number 10 role, the enganche, the Argentine playmaker who lives between midfield and attack. The middle of the pitch was his native language. Somewhere along the way, in the machinery of a big European club that already had its stars occupying the good real estate, he had been quietly filed out to the wing and told to make himself useful there. So when the great tactical revolution finally arrived, it worked less like an invention and more like a homecoming. Guardiola was about to send Messi back to exactly where he had started, and then watch what a fully grown genius could do with the position a small boy had once played in a dusty stadium in Rosario. Then, in 2008, two things happened that quietly rearranged the future. Ronaldinho left, and Pep Guardiola walked in. Guardiola inherited a squad that had gone soft and a genius who was still being used as wide decoration. His answer was a 4-3-3 that turned possessions into a form of slow-motion torture. Dani Alves bombed up the right flank outside Messi, which meant Messi no longer had to hug the line to give the team width. Samuel Eto'o stretched defences through the middle. Behind them, Xavi and Andres Iniesta passed opponents into a quiet despair. And Messi, finally given permission to cut inside onto that left foot, started turning into something new, not just a dribbler. A problem with no clean answer. He was scoring, creating, dropping his shoulder and leaving defenders committed to a direction he had already abandoned 2 seconds earlier. By the spring of 2009, he was the most dangerous right winger alive. Which, if you happen to be Pep Guardiola, raised a very uncomfortable and very delicious question. What happens if you take the wall away completely? Guardiola had a habit that bordered on an illness. He watched film, Not a little film, all of it. Coaches talk about studying opponents the way people talk about flossing, as a virtuous thing they fully intend to get around to. Pep actually did it, for hours in the dark, rewinding the same passages until patterns started bleeding through the screen. That week, he was watching Real Madrid. And Real Madrid, for all their money and all their talent, had a weakness sitting right in the middle of them. Their centre-backs, Fabio Cannavaro and Christophe Metzelder, were old school, disciplined, physical, comfortable marking a striker who did them the courtesy of standing still in front of them. What they hated, what nearly every classic centre-back hates, was a decision. Specifically the decision of whether to follow a forward who suddenly drops deep, or to hold the line and let him wander. Follow him, and you rip a hole in your own defence. Stay, and you hand one of the best players on earth a quiet acre of grass between the lines. Pep looked at that gap and saw a door. The day before the match, he called Messi into his office at the training ground. Messi later admitted the whole thing caught him off guard. Guardiola told him he'd been studying Madrid obsessively, the way he studied everyone, that he'd talked it through with his assistant Tito Villanova, and that they'd landed on something strange. Messi would not start as a winger. He'd start through the centre, as a false nine, a striker who refuses to behave like one. The plan was almost cruel in how simple